This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 461 for Thursday, March 9th, 2023. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we're into. Joining me tonight, one of my favorite geeks, Alastair McFly, is back. You can find him at alastairmcfly.com with links to Long Range Sensors, a Star Trek retrospective podcast, sister show, Short Range Sensors, as well as twitch.tv/alastairmcfly, and a new blog at medium.com/@AlastairMcFly, because Medium likes to be difficult. Welcome, sir. It's been a minute. How are you?
It has been. I am very good. Very tired, but very good.
It's that long stride, that February, March Canadian winter push, as I like to say.
Yeah.
And I know we're not supposed to talk about weather at the top of the show, but it's just, dude, the weather, it's been shit. The weather has been shit. And I just, it's the these four walls syndrome has been creeping in. Thankfully, I do go to the gym, so like I get out of the house on a regular basis. But like my work day to day, if I have enough food in the fridge, I don't tend to need to leave the house much. And I won't get into the rabbit hole of talking about grocery prices in Canada right now. For those that are watching the news, you know what I mean. But I get a couple of meals delivered now with Chef's Plate. Not a sponsor. If you want to be a sponsor, Chef's Plate, I like your stuff. But it means that I have groceries delivered to me once a week for like 4 of my dinners, which cuts down my grocery trips remarkably. So again, less reasons to leave the house.
Yeah.
So when you have meals in the fridge for 4 days and the weather is crappy, you're like, yeah, I'm fine. I don't need outside people. It's fine. Well, sometimes you might need a little human connection now and then. Just, go figure. Who knew? But yeah, I understand. I understand the feeling of that long sort of like just waiting for the, I don't want to say schedule to change, but I guess routine. You and I are creatures of habit, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have actually started a new thing as well. I've been rock climbing. I've been going on a bit of an indoor rock climbing course.
Oh, cool.
Lately. And so I'm also tired from that on top of things.
Yeah,
too.
that'll do it. And that's a hell of a workout.
Yeah, and especially as we were dealing with foot technique, which requires you to be holding on for a lot longer than you normally would. And so my forearms are pretty sore. To the point that I realized today that just trying to pick things up with one hand, actually a lot more painful and difficult than it should be. I tried to open up a bottle of milk, like chocolate milk, scoot up. I could barely, I always had to get somebody else just to open my bottle for me. It was humiliating. I'm so glad I persevered and I got my milk.
Yeah, you have to have that, like, I loosened it for you, like right on the tip of your tongue. Like the moment that they hand it back to you open, it's like, I loosened that for you. That's what I did there. So my mother does that, and she gets angry because my stepdad used to be a carpenter and a chef, so worked with his hands his entire life. And so when he puts the lid back on a jar, he doesn't like try to tighten it harder than, anyone else in the house can open, but just naturally, he just does that. And I'll be down for dinner and mom will be like trying to open up a jar of pickles or something like that. And she's just like, she'll be struggling with it and she'll just look at me like, here. And I'll just like, what do you want me to? Oh, and then, so I open it up and give it to her. And I don't even think about it because I didn't try. Like I just opened it and she just looks at me. It's like, fuck off. It's like, okay, you're obviously in a mood. Like what's going on? And she just gets frustrated that she can't get, it's just not enough torque. Plus it's awkward and mom's left-handed. So like she would be gripping the jar with her left hand and then trying to use her right to open it.
So everything's working against her basically.
Yeah. So it's because she has to go the other way. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything's working against her. So, and I'm the opposite. Like I'm right-handed, but I would grab the jar with my right hand and then twist with my left. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's that kind of stuff. When you have different kind of workouts, when you switch it up, and then you realize that there are other things that you use like on a regular basis that are really sore. I did that the last time I did a leg workout. I did something. I switched some things up, and I specifically was targeting glutes. And then you just realize around the house when you're putting dishes away, and you're like going down to a low cabinet, you're like, oh wow, this is mostly glute. Who knew? Like I didn't realize that I used my butt this much when I had to get something out of the low cupboard. But turns out that when you train at the gym heavier than you're used to, and you switch up the exercises, your body will let you know. I mean, that's
what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah. I didn't realize that you were interested in rock climbing. That's awesome.
It was something that I used to do when I was a child. So I say child, like young teenager. There was a church in Warrington in the north of England that had been converted into a whole climbing center.
Oh, cool.
And that's what they have here in Halifax. There was an old cinema that they've converted on Quinpool Road. And so that's where I've been going. The Oxford. Yeah, that's now an indoor climbing.
It's an indoor climbing gym now.
Yes.
Wow.
And I have been wanting to go there. I was following them on Instagram when they were converting it because they were posting photos showing all the work that they were doing, which was really cool.
Yeah.
And then I got hit by a car. So that injury meant that I couldn't go climbing. And whilst I was just about getting better, not quite enough to go back to the gym, that's when COVID happened. So,
yeah.
So it's been a long time coming that I've been wanting to get back into climbing. And now that things are starting to settle a little bit more and my injuries are at a point where I don't have to worry about them anymore, I'm able to go. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
I can make jokes because you're okay. But the cartoonist in me, like the brain just kind of goes to you walking across the street, like in a crosswalk, looking at the Oxford Theater like, oh, cool, it's being converted into a blam, hit by a car. Like I just, like, I don't know why my brain went there.
Well, I was crossing the street when that happened.
Well, yes.
It just wasn't for the Oxford.
Story. Yeah. Anyway, he's fine. Everything's fine now, and you're climbing, so obviously full recuperation. But that's really cool.
Yes.
I tried some climbing indoors as well, and I found the shoes incredibly uncomfortable. And so I didn't keep it up. That was my problem.
Yeah, that was my lesson yesterday, actually, was all about the type of shoes that you get. And again, for the footwork, how basically you should just be using your toes as the short of it.
Yeah, which for me,
the rest of your foot and
I keep on thinking like I would be better at this barefoot. Like I have large, wide, flat feet. Like just let me be Beast from X-Men, because that's what I feel like is going to happen with those shoes when I have them on. Just like rip, and then just like the toes just kind of come out and just grip things. So anyway, it's been a long time since I've tried that. I would not be any good at it, but that's good. I mean, it's a heck of a workout. It's and something that you can do. Because I see people post on Instagram all the time, some of the outdoorsy people that I follow, they'll take crash mats down to like different rock faces around the Maritimes, and they'll do like bouldering, and they're not like going super high. The idea is they're just kind of going along the rock face and practicing technique and stuff. But they're outside, like, so you don't have to be indoors all the time.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of being indoors and watching people that are in very good shape, I downloaded a new game via Game Pass Ultimate on Xbox. It's called Guilty Gear Strive. I've never heard of it. I don't know why it's called Guilty Gear Strive. I think it's kind of a dumb name. If you know the franchise, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But it's a 2D fighting game a la Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, like that kind of back and forth. You're just kind of like trying to combo special move with the other player. It's a new franchise to me, and it is weird. Very pretty, but weird. And
define weird in this context.
So, I mean, there's some characters that you think, okay, this is kind of like big anime dude with a sword, cute anime girl with a sword. The whole thing is very Japanese anime inspired. And it's, I shouldn't say inspired, like it is an anime sort of in terms of like what it would identify as an art style. But then you've got things like this one guy that doesn't actually fight with his hands and his feet. Like he summons this kind of smoke demon from around him and hits you with it. There's a dude that he's a walking tank. There's another guy that's swinging. He's swinging a coffin on a chain, and it's as big as you are. Like there's some really strange stuff. And then there's another guy that apparently is a doctor with a paper bag over his head that has like a syringe. It's like a cross between the Scarecrow from Batman, a little bit of the Joker, and a little bit of like kind of like insert any anime demon that you've ever seen, the tall, skinny, lanky type ones, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then of course there's a
What?
there's a smorgasbord of scantily clad women in the game, of course.
Of course. But why does the Doctor have a bag on his head?
I don't know. He has a glowing red eye like the Terminator too. I don't know, Alastair. This is the thing.
I'm picturing it like a brown paper shopping bag.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
lunch
it.
Bag. Lunch bag.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Lunch bag.
I don't remember his name, but the we'll have a link in the show notes, and you can look at the characters, yourself at home, folks. But the thing is, like, it's the kind of thing that I'm glad I didn't spend any money on, but because I have access to it via Game Pass, and the trailer looked cool, and I looked up a couple of reviews online, and people were saying like, look, it's a really good fighting game. Like it takes a bit of learning to get used to, but it's a basic, like it has introductory techniques that you can get into. It has a lot to master, but you can pick it up pretty quickly. And I messed around and picked up a few characters, and I used to play a lot of Chun-Li when I was playing Street Fighter a lot as a kid. So I gravitate to those kind of characters because they tend to be a little bit more straightforward than the really weird ones, right?
Yeah.
So I can't remember. Giovanna, I think is her name. She's got like a green wolf that kind of wraps around her. And everything in this game has some sort of weird, either technical, sci-fi fantasy, or like spiritual thing going on. So I don't know how they're all from the same world. Like the story is non-existent. I tried playing the story mode and it does not make sense. And I understand that I'm coming to this as this is a sequel. I have not seen the other one. So I knew I was going to be lost, but I did not expect to be lost in the level of like, they're speaking English, but like, the call and response from two characters doesn't make any sense. It's like someone say, "Oh, I see that you have found me in my prison." And the next person says like, "Yes, my uncle was once the captain of a ship." And you're like, "Well, what?" And I don't know whether it's losing something in translation, but anyway, it is weird. Like I said, I'm lost.
Yeah.
But I don't play these games for the story. They're not meant to be fantastic.
I was going to say, like, I find it weird in itself that a fighting game would have a story mode. I mean, when you have Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, they've obviously got background story to the characters that you would normally get from flicking through a manual, really. But it's basically you're just pairing off fighters, really. That's it. And so the idea of a story mode in a 2D fighter, I'm trying to get my head around that one. So
one of the things that I will draw a comparison to would be something like Mortal Kombat did have a little bit of a story as it got going on. And the other one is it's built on the Mortal Kombat engine, but the DC fighting one, the Justice or Injustice, that had cutscenes and reasons for pitting superhero against superhero, and you crossed into a different dimension. And so there was like, World 1 Batman and World 2 Batman or World 2 Superman, etc. And in their world, Superman was evil and running like a fascist regime and all this kind of stuff.
Right,
so it gave you a reason why Batman was facing off of what looked like Superman, but it's not your Superman, it's something else.
Yeah. I haven't really played any of the newer style. Like for me, it's old 90s. 2D fighters that I've played. So I'm not as familiar with the more recent Mortal Kombats, and especially when they're bringing in things like the DC ones and stuff as well.
Well, the DC one is worth watching if you can find like a cutscene, I guess, compilation on YouTube where people don't record the entire fight, but they've captured the story bits, the cutscenes, where Batman and Robin are arguing about something, and then he has to fight Wonder Woman. They don't show the whole Wonder Woman fight. They show the beginning, and they show the middle, and they show the end real quick, and then they go to the next cutscene. So it's worth doing that just to kind of see the kind of cool stories, and it's got all the right voices and some great animation and stuff like that. Although to bring it back to Guilty Gear, the reason why I picked it up is because despite the animation and story in the story mode being weird and awful on both fronts, the animation in the game, like the actual gameplay, is fantastic. Like it almost looks like stop motion in some instances. I would say the closest thing I've seen recently in years would be Into the Spider-Verse in terms of how dynamic and fluid and well thought out all of these characters are. And they have to move in response to what you're doing as the player, right? And everything is pretty seamless. And I really, really like it. They're CG models, but it's meant to be cell shaded. It's meant to look flat like a manga or an anime. And the character designs are, like I said, some of them are weird, but by and large, they're very cool looking. You can change the colors, how you see fit. And as you learn some of the moves, the special effects and the stuff that you can pull off, like you feel badass, even when you're just doing like a simple roundhouse kick with a flare, and then your spirit dog kind of like whips around and, smashes the other person in the face. Or if you get a combo, or once you start to learn these different things, it has enough of that like visual explosion kind of eye candy going on that really, really kind of makes it feel cool. And it gets some points for me for managing characters that end up being like the size of the screen. Like if you were this little girl, Giovanna, and you're going up against this Hulk iron, character, I don't remember their names, but he literally is the half the size of my TV. And when you use that character, yes, you feel slow, but he still has to respond and have all the same kind of moves that every other fighter in the game has, and he does. And it feels good to play him, and so I have to tip my hat to the designers in that way. I mean, it's not meant to be, a story. It's meant to be eye candy. It's got a huge competitive component. I am not playing online with other people. I am just fighting the computer for fun for half an hour to kind of like, I needed something I could pick up and put down at any point, right?
Yeah.
And I was tired of Forza driving around, which I like, but it does get boring after a while. And so this is kind of a nice kind of pick it up, put it down, whatever. Arcade mode is the one that I play, where it just kind of like takes you through and you fight until you lose like 3 in a row or something like that. And then you're over. And I get to stage 8 so far on normal, which is not bad, for a beginner. So I'm learning. But I would encourage people to check it out. If you do have Game Pass, it's worth picking up purely because like you're not paying for it. You're already paying for the subscription. And so I would check it out. If I know that you like some fighting games, because you've got a Street Fighter table, right? Like that's one of a couple that you have in an arcade at home.
That's right. Yeah, it's a head-to-head table with the original Street Fighter and then 5 additional variations on Street Fighter 2.
Right.
And then 6 other games built into that one. I've also got X-Men versus Street Fighter as a separate cabinet with a couple of other games on that too.
Right.
And then Mortal Kombat, which has all 3 Mortal Kombats, and it's the Midway Legacy, so there's a whole bunch of other Midway games as well. But yeah, so a good variety. I've got enough fighting games basically.
Yes. Yeah.
to keep me kind of covered for things. And yeah, it's the same thing. Like I struggle to have the time these days to really sit down and spend and devote a lot of time to a game. So having the arcades, it's nice just to be able to go play for 10 minutes, and that can be enough. And I mean, fine. And it also means that I'm not getting to a point where I'm getting bored of them either, which, kind of helps when they take up so much room.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would say, because I haven't played all of the Street Fighters, but I know I've played one that you own, which is the Street Fighter X-Men one.
Yes.
I would say this compares closest to that out of the rosters. It's not like Mortal Kombat. It's a lot more like Street Fighter, but certainly more like Street Fighter X-Men because of how diverse that roster is. It's like Chun-Li versus Juggernaut, right? Like that
Yes.
kind of a matchup. And that's what this game kind of offers in terms of the variety. But there's some really, really interesting things in it. And like I said, the animation is beautiful. If you like fighting games and you are a fan of animation, specifically anime, it's worth taking a look. And certainly even just watching some videos online, maybe, because some of the moves, of course, like any kind of special finishing move is like really over the top. It goes like Dragon Ball, when they do the final moves. It can be a lot of fun in that way. We have a listener email this week, so I'd like to move on to that. That comes in from Jordan P., a cafe community member of the Patreon page. You can visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe if you'd like to support the show. The subject is TV shows of the last year. Hello there, Joel and Alastair. As I was looking back on the shows I watched last year, I realized that I only really watched 4 new shows: House of the Dragon, The Peripheral, Reacher, and The Rings of Power. I finished 2 of these series, and I'm currently watching The Peripheral. I was wondering, how would you rate these 4 shows, or any other shows from 2022? Mine are as follows. Reacher, it was nearly perfect and didn't overdo it. The Peripheral, I'm on episode 4, has quite a bit of good, but I do not feel like it has a good enough backstory. The Rings of Power, I wish it was closer to the Silmarillion, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. And House of the Dragon, I did not finish this. I dislike almost all of the characters and did not want to watch the story because of how much I hated some of them. Rant over. Thanks for the awesome podcast, Jordan. Jordan, thanks very much for the email. Very much appreciated. I do have a rating for the ones that you've listed, and I have a few that I can add. I will let you know that I did not watch any of the House of Dragon, so that's at the bottom of my list, but purely because I haven't seen it. But I would flip this around. I would actually have Rings of Power as my number 1 in your list, The Peripheral as number 2, and then Reacher as number 3. However, Peripheral and Reacher were really close. They both have good production. They both kind of did what they said they were going to do. I had a hard time getting into The Peripheral because I think it was harder on the head in some ways. But ultimately, I think the production value and the concept of The Peripheral is what won out over Reacher. I still like Reacher, but these were really close as mine 2 and 3. Out of these 4, Alastair, have you seen all 4?
Not all 4, no. I've seen Rings of Power and House of the Dragon. So I've seen those 2. Peripheral and Reacher have kind of been on my to-watch list, but I've been so preoccupied with a few other shows, I just haven't quite got round to them yet. But Rings of Power, I would say, of the 2 that I have seen, was definitely the better of the 2. House of the Dragon, I liked it. It's one of those odd things that with it being, kind of Game of Thrones type thing, it's not. It's more of a prequel thing. It's interesting. I really like Matt Smith, and so I thought he was quite good in that. But it was one of those, I'm watching it because it was on, and at the time there wasn't really much else on either.
Right.
So it wasn't one that I was kind of jumping to like, oh my God, I can't wait to see this. It was one of those, oh good, there's something to watch today. More than anything.
Right.
And visually, it's great. Like it's like the set design, just the quality is what you would come to expect from that kind of series. Rings of Power threw me off guard because I thought it was a mini-series. I thought it was just 1 season and then it was done. So it's kind of getting towards the end. I'm like, I thought this was supposed to be this whole prequel thing, and it feels like there's not much time to get to where they need to. And then I realized that, this is an ongoing series, and that made me very happy. But for the longest time, I just thought it was just going to be those, it was like 6 or 8 episodes. I can't remember how many.
I want to say it was 6.
Yeah, I think it was 6, but...
No, because 6, I think, is when the big climax happened, and we thought that was a season ender, and it was not. So you're right, it might be 8. It's not 10.
Yeah,
I can tell you that. I don't think it was 10.
Yeah, it didn't reach that much. But I thought that that's all we were getting, and then finding out that it continues, that makes me feel a lot better because 1, loved it. I thought it was really good, and 2, it's just nice that we'll get more time to follow on some of the other stuff because there's a lot that they've set up, but just has not been wrapped up yet at all.
We had a good conversation here on the Citadel Cafe about Rings of Power with my co-host on the Spawn Chunks, the Pixel Riffs, Johnny. And he brought a lot of really great external knowledge that I don't have from the Tolkien universe. And I'm pretty sure, just to kind of be clear here, that the Silmarillion is not part of the Rings of Power. I'm pretty sure that it's only the appendices of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit or something that they have access to in terms of the rights. I'm pretty sure the Silmarillion was not, but I could be wrong. It could be that they only have access to the Silmarillion appendices, but not the actual book. I don't know.
I had not. I hadn't even thought about the rights beyond just Lord of the Rings.
Well, they're making new ones now. Like there's new films in production, and it's different than the rights that Amazon has because Amazon is doing one thing, and there's films. I think New Line is looking to do more films. Like they were talking to Peter Jackson about it. I think sorry folks, I don't remember where I saw this online. Probably social media, so take it with a grain of salt. But but I know that there's talks. I don't know who's involved and whatnot, but I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
I
down
hadn't
for
even
it.
thought about the licensing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down for it if they do bring it in. I would say actually, if I was to look at my top shows of 2022, and I cheated and I went to Rotten Tomatoes just to get a list of like the top 150 shows, which I was surprised there was that many. Just to kind of refresh my brain of like what was released in 2022. Like I kind of had to get my
Yeah.
brain around it. And because I was like, was that the fall of 2021 or was it 2022 or did it start there and end in 22? Anyway, my top 5 are in this order: Obi-Wan Kenobi, Rings of Power, Andor, Miss Marvel, and Stranger Things season 4. And I didn't love Stranger Things season 4, but I was still on the edge of my chair for most of it. So it made the ranking out of everything else that I was looking at, because there's a bunch of other things like The Peripheral, like Reacher, that were good, but they didn't make the top 5. But they would certainly be in the top 10 in terms of, probably right after Stranger Things, to be honest. Probably Peripheral and Reacher, 6 and 7. But yeah, I really liked Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think that there's an advantage to doing limited series, as you were expecting with Lord of the Rings, with Rings of Power. I think that knowing you've got 6 episodes, keeping it concise, letting those episodes be as long as you need them to be, it wasn't perfect, but it was still a really, really good show. Same thing with Rings of Power. I still had problems with it, but overall, they weren't anything that broke the experience for me. Andor I really liked, and I think Andor had a lot of flexibility because it was a kind of Star Wars story that we've not really seen much of before. The closest we would have had would be Rogue One. But this took like spy Star Wars to a new level. And because they were operating like in the shadows, there was all kinds of stuff that they could get into that we'd never seen before, which I thought was really interesting. Miss Marvel was just a lot of fun. That was just a well done, well received, positive show, all around. I think that's why I didn't get into House of Dragons. I heard that it was good, but I heard that it was more of the same. A lot of violence, that kind of stuff. And I find these days, I really don't have much patience for a bunch of people on screen behaving badly and getting away with it. I need to have at least someone that's trying to be good and trying to do the right thing. I need someone to identify with, because I don't identify with those kind of characters. The ruthless, cutthroat. That's why I don't watch Empire or Billions or any of these dramas that are just a bunch of rich people behaving badly, which Game of Thrones is no different. Not my cup of tea. I don't need it to be squeaky clean, but to draw a comparison, like I think that's why I'm drawn to characters like Captain America, right?
Yeah.
He has to make some great decisions. Captain America shoots people. Like, he's not a Superman. He's not above killing Nazis, right? But there's just that, even when he makes mistakes, he's trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. And I need a character like that, and I think that even if it's not one character, because I feel like in The Peripheral, I can't remember character names right now, but the brother-sister main characters, they're both flawed and they both have different reasons for what they're doing, but they're both getting about halfway there to doing the right thing. But together as a team, they're kind of doing it. And I think that's why I like that show above some of the other darker apocalyptic stuff that's come out in the last little while, is because they are trying to do, good by their mother, and they're trying not to be evil people. There are evil people in the show, and they're trying not to stoop to that level. Whereas I feel like Game of Thrones, and again, I haven't seen House of Dragon, but what I've heard is like everybody is just trying to be an evil son of a bitch. And it's just, that's just the par for the course. That's the baseline,
Yeah.
and how evil is just how much, not how much good you can do, it's how much evil you can do. And that's a show I just tend to not get involved with.
Right. There's 2 new shows that jump out to mind from that year, on top of the ones that have already been mentioned. And the first one is Peacemaker, which, and I know you're not too much of a fan of James Gunn, but that was a show that caught me by surprise. I didn't realize it was the show that I needed, especially at the time. It was a lot funnier than I was expecting to be. I wasn't expecting it to be much, because it's a spin-off from the Suicide Squad film. but it was just incredibly funny. The characters, it was, I'm trying to think what to kind of compare it to, but I just thought it was just wacky, just fun, and just basically just went all out in the right way, and was very entertaining. And then the other one is probably no surprise to anybody, especially yourself, but that would be Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Right, yes.
Which, again, fantastic new show to come in 2022. And even for people who haven't been a fan of all of the new Star Trek shows coming out, this is the one that seems to really be uniting a lot of fans, both new and old, just because of how well and how faithful and true to the whole franchise this new show has been.
So I was just quickly Googling the Book of Boba Fett, and technically it premiered on December 29th, 2021, which I guess is why it wasn't on this Rotten Tomatoes list that I was looking at quickly. Yeah. I don't think I would put that as high up. I would put episodes of it high up in my best episodes that I've seen. But overall,
the Mandalorian episodes,
yeah,
specifically
Mandalorian season 2.5 that happened in the middle of Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah,
yeah. So that's why that didn't make my list. Because I mean, it's no accident that there's a lot of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings in my list, because like that's just, it speaks to my fandom. But also they're doing good stuff. You know, like there's lots of other fan shows out there, and they don't often land quite as strong, with the exception of Star Trek, of course. But I don't often have access to that. I'm not watching as many series as you are in Star Trek, so I only tune in when there's something to watch. Speaking of that, that's going to be the main discussion this week. Alastair and I are going to be talking about Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you've not gotten to today's episode, released today, then you should maybe go watch those and come back and join us, because we will not be able to talk about this without spoilers, because there's spoilers in the first episode even, I think. Yes. A lot happens. They jam a lot in here. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I will say that I have watched the Mandalorian season 3 premiere. I enjoyed it, but there's not a lot going on yet. It's a fun return to that show. It looks beautiful. I'm happy about it. I liked where things are headed, I think, but we really don't have enough information to have much of a conversation about it, other than like some very deep Star Wars-y nerd stuff. And that requires having seen like a lot of other Star Wars content. So I will be talking about The Mandalorian, but I'm probably going to wait for another week or two to get about halfway through the season, and then talk about like what's going on and what we're seeing. So hopefully that will come later on. But I am enjoying it, and I am going to continue to watch. I did not get a chance to watch it today because I was catching up on Picard. So I mean, obviously you have a much deeper relationship with Star Trek than I do. But I will say, just kind of like generally, I'm really enjoying season 3. They are doing things I didn't think they were going to do. I knew from the trailers and from the news and from you that they were bringing back, a certain, amount of the original cast members reprising, like in most cases, their roles on the show. And in some ways they did that. Like, I mean, Riker was in season 1 of Picard as well, which I really like. And so I'm really enjoying that dynamic. I'm really enjoying what they're doing. I will say, and I don't want to dwell on this because it's not a happy thought, but in this season in particular, whether or not it's acting, if it is, then good on him. But Patrick Stewart is looking old, and he looks tired. And I'm sure a good portion of this is acting, because they're going through a lot. Like, they are putting the characters through the ringer in this show. But it's reminding me of how old he actually is. And I've seen him in some interviews. I saw him on Late Night with, not with Conan, with Colbert. And he seemed in good spirits, like he did, but he still seemed small and elderly, and I mean it with as much respect as I can muster, but he's getting up there. But that to me kind of jumped out a couple times in the show. But again, like, Picard as a character is much older than Stewart, right? Picard in the show is like 100 and something, right? That's how old he's supposed to be.
Yeah, and of course now he's got this kind of robot body as well from season 1.
Yeah, there's all this kind of stuff that's going on.
Yeah, but he's supposed to be a lot older. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that overall, very much enjoying it. Enjoying the crew getting back together. There's some things that are kind of lost on me, but I'm sure that you could kind of clear that up. But I feel like I've been talking a lot. So for you, I mean, like coming into season 3 with as much Star Trek knowledge as you have, specifically with the Next Generation, how are you finding it so far?
Well, I'm thrilled to bits. I'm absolutely chuffed with this whole season. I would also say, and I'm not going to jump too far ahead, but the latest episode that came out was a hell of a ride and just kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. But most of all, I really appreciate the way they've gone about this. It doesn't feel like, oh, let's just have a reunion, let's just do a Next Generation episode. And I know that that's something that Patrick Stewart has made a big deal of, that he didn't want to just do the same thing. This feels like these characters are coming in for the right reasons. And it also feels like where Picard is now makes a lot of sense. Like, he's doing things, he's making mistakes, he's putting the ship in jeopardy. But when you look back at everything that he's been through, it makes sense that he would get to that point. And as an example for this, it's kind of like how he's putting his own desires ahead of the crew and the sort of the risk there. But we have seen how he gets when vengeance is involved. We saw what it was like after he was assimilated by the Borg, when he's suddenly faced with a Borg drone, when he first meets Hugh in The Next Generation, that he just hates the Borg and wants to get revenge and send a virus out to them. And then later in Star Trek First Contact, the movie, the whole thing is him trying to get vengeance on the Borg. And so it kind of makes sense that now that we find out, one of the big spoilers, that he has a son now that he wasn't even aware of, that when we have somebody who is trying to take his son, he wants to make sure that he can put a stop to that, so that he's not in a position kind of like he was with the Borg, and where he would have that kind of vengeance. And it's a little bit of that is kind of creeping out. And so it doesn't feel out of place at all. It certainly feels like he has changed over time as a result of all of these things that we've seen over all these decades.
Yeah, I can feel I don't want to say recklessness, but the quick decision making, we'll say.
Yeah.
It's not reckless in that he doesn't have any reasons or he's off the cuff, but I feel like rather than pontificating about something for as long as a Star Trek episode usually would take before they make a decision in The Next Generation, here there's just the decisions are just made quickly.
Yeah,
and
a little bit more emotionally impulsive.
Yeah. Well, I would say like the themes that I'm picking up, especially with the reveal that he had a son with Crusher, by the way, who I always thought they were a good match. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of who I, would think if you were to say, write what happens to the crew after the final episode of TNG, that this would have been one of the things I would have certainly speculated on. But with that, like with the fact that there was some shore leave, they were trying for like the 4th or 5th time to have a relationship and it wasn't working out. He kept on getting called away and she ended up getting pregnant. And then one thing led to another. He was in dire situations here, there, and everywhere. And she just never told him. And then she told her son when he was old enough to know who his father was, and he decided that he didn't want to meet him. And so it's been 23, 24 years or something like that. They in this latest episode, Jack Crusher is the character's name, Picard's son, revealed his age to be 23 or 24, which is, I find kind of hard because I think the actor that plays him is a lot older than that. He's 34. He's only 10 years younger than me. So yeah, it's a little bit, he doesn't feel quite as naive as I consider, I shouldn't say that, but like 22-year-olds in Star Trek, you tend to think of like Crusher, like Wesley Crusher, not Jack Crusher. Jack Crusher seems a lot more worldly than I was expecting a young man to be. Either way, I like him. Ed Spielers, who plays him, does very, very well. But that reveal and that kind of like position where it's been the line that Picard says to Crusher, Beverly Crusher, is like, you made the decision for me rather than seeing whether I would be a good father, a present father. Like you removed me from that equation. And so there is loss, there is regret, there is the would have, could have, should have done it differently thing. And that I feel has been a theme over the whole season, not just Picard and his son and that relationship, or Crusher, Beverly Crusher, but with like Riker and his son that died. Thaddeus, I think was his name.
Yeah.
Thad, anyway. Yeah. Thad for sure. Yeah. Because they called him Thad in season 1. We never met him. They just kind of said, Troy. And,
because he'd already passed away at that point.
Yeah, he'd already passed away. And they have a daughter. Like they had 2 kids and their elder son passed away. Some strange disease. I don't remember what it was called, but and then so you're dealing with like Riker's loss and Riker's regrets and how time has passed and how he's got regrets about how he and Deanna Troi have had some difficulties because he's now out in space doing the Federation captain thing because he needs to get away, and he was kind of partially retired or something at some point. But they're kind of bringing it all through, and that idea of regret, time passing, and wishing you had a chance to do it over again is really interesting because these are all characters that are now in their 70s, and so there's this juxtaposition of like, I'm not suggesting that any of the actors have anything that they regret not doing in their, career sort of idea, but there's something to do, like it does bring in some of the questions of old age, what people think about when they're 70, did they do enough? Did they raise their kids right? Like all that kind of stuff. And they're doing it very, very well. Very, very well.
And of course, they're kind of at the position of when I was a kid watching them in Next Generation, this is kind of where the original series cast was getting to, where we had Kirk, pondering about the fact that he was getting old, right. And, and would he be alone and things. And this is why when it culminates in Star Trek Generations, when the Nexus kind of lures him with this love for a woman called Antonia that he never really got to have because of his career. He's like, now I get a second chance and things. And so it all kind of follows on like that in a way. And so it's interesting seeing this now happening to the Next Generation crew as they're kind of reaching that age as well.
And I'm glad that they didn't do anything so far with a time loop, because those were always my least favorite episodes of TNG whenever you get into something with Q or something with a time loop. And that to me was just like infuriating because it was the same 15 minutes of TV over and over again until they figure out how to break the time loop. They got close because the Shrike, which is a warship that they've run into deep in space, has some sort of portal ability. And I mean that literally. If you've played the game Portal, this is the weapon that it has on the front of it. And the ship, the Titan is the name of the ship that they're on, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And the Titan tries to get away from the ship, and it goes through the portal, and then they kind of like portal it back, and they bring it back around. And
the tactics that they're using for that is fantastic.
Oh, it's very cool. It
works.
Yeah, and I only caught on, I want to say, midway through episode 3. Just before they kind of explain to you, the viewer, what they're going to do and what's going on. Riker said something along the lines of like, if she wanted us dead, we would have been dead already. And so you realize that she wants Jack. This is the character of Vadic is who she introduces herself as. Interesting, played by Amanda Plummer, daughter of Christopher Plummer, I believe.
Indeed.
Who played Khan, right? No, not Khan. What's his name?
Chancellor Gorkon.
Gorkon. Yeah, Klingon, right? You played a Klingon?
Yes, yeah, in Star Trek 6.
6.
Yeah.
So like another adversary, generational thing, but in the actors, which I thought was really, really cool. I knew I was going to get some of these names wrong, so forgive me. Even with IMDb in front of me, it's like, I know who the actor is, who's the character he played.
Yeah.
So they're doing some cool stuff like that.
I've just made a fluff as well. Sorry, not Gorkon. It was General Chang. Sorry.
Sure. See, I figured you'd get it right, so I just said, I'll agree.
Yeah, how have I thrown?
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, he played General Chang, the guy with the eye patch, basically.
Yes, yeah. I could picture him, like I could see him, because I knew who he played, because I've seen those movies quite a few times.
Yeah.
But yeah. So there
you go. If I've made a mistake, you can get away with making a mistake.
There we go.
I've set the bar. We're fine.
Yeah. But the fact that they're trying to get Jack Crusher off the ship, there's some greater plot happening with Jack Crusher, and he's got visions, like he's seeing things inside of his head. Like there's more going on with him than we know right now. So at the end of episode 4, the first 4 episode arc is complete in terms of the crew. Picard got a mystery message from Beverly Crusher. Basically, I'm in trouble. Please help. He and Riker go out to save her. They commandeer, against rules, a Federation ship. They go do that with the help of Seven. And then they end up in an anomaly and a dogfight, cat and mouse chase through this anomaly with the Shrike. And then they have to escape. But that's the first 4 episodes. But there's still more coming, and there's still more to happen with Jack Crusher and his importance and all this kind of stuff. But they did a really good job of balancing, I think, the dire nature of the crew of the Titan A, you said it was called?
Yes.
And like the seriousness of that situation with some fan service, some great lines. I can watch Riker and Picard talk about, I don't know, pudding, and I'd be happy. Like there's something about their candor on screen and the amount of fun that they have with what they're doing. And I like how you mentioned it, like you're talking about how the original cast was at that kind of like later stage of questioning kind of like where they were in terms of the characters when they were crossing over with the Next Generation. But I find that with this, I'm seeing more cowboy Kirk and fly by the seat of your pants, and it's not all about the Prime Directive and the rules and Starfleet regulation, because all the regulation doesn't seem to be working for the Titan A until Riker gets command and starts cowboying the hell out of everything and starts really like just making judgment calls, doing things outside of the book, using his experience to just make judgment calls quickly and not just constantly cite, Starfleet regulation. And that's when they start to make progress. They start to survive the encounters better. They start to have a plan. He does get kind of, I want to say, not strung out, but he feels stubborn, I guess, in episode 3. And there's a couple of really odd wooden exchanges between Riker and Picard on the bridge that I didn't feel landed very well. It felt almost out of character. Now, I don't know whether that's me picking up on just some lines that didn't land very well, or whether I'm so used to seeing Picard in this series, I've kind of gotten to know where he is as a character 20 years later. But I've not seen enough of Riker, Crusher, Troy, Worf to know where they are. All I have is just their dialogue in this season, right? Whereas Picard, I've got 2 seasons of episodes of story and situations to kind of understand a little bit more. I also get that Riker is dealing with some stuff too. Like he's dealing with some pent up emotion personally.
Yeah, and I think as well, a lot of it is he's been a first officer for so long, a lot longer than he was supposed to. People kept offering him commands of different starships, and he kept saying no because he wanted to remain on the Enterprise. And then he has been a captain of the Titan, the original one. This is the second ship to bear the name. and he's gotten that experience as a captain himself. So there's a little bit of that. There's also the way that he's challenging Picard and the arguments that they're having is part of the reason why Picard wanted him to be first officer.
Right.
We find out in an episode called The Pegasus when Admiral Pressman comes aboard. He was a captain on board the titular Pegasus. And he had sat down with Picard, and there was this whole conversation about how at one point Will had stood up to a previous captain, and he's just kind of like, that's what I want. I want somebody who will stand up to me and tell me when I'm being wrong, basically. So that's kind of still gels and fills in with this, that there is going to be a little bit more clashing. But now that he's more of an equal because he's been a captain, I feel like he's a little bit more into doing so, especially as he's got more responsibility to some degree.
Yeah. I think for me, it was the dismissal of Picard off the bridge. After basically they run out of options, and Riker gives the command to attack after Picard reiterates, "You're out of options, you should attack and go on the offensive." And he does that and it backfires, and they use the portal to redirect the torpedoes. I'm just like, but it was your call. Well, like, you were the captain. Yeah. Yes, you listened to the advice from the Admiral, but you still made the call. So I didn't feel like him tossing the Admiral off the bridge. Well, one, it also had that weak moment of like, well, you just sentenced us all to die. I was like, not on episode 4, you haven't. Like, I know you're not dying now. So there was that, which was, I think, a bit of a problem for me. But that wasn't a problem with the delivery. That was just a bad line at the time.
There's a bit of pleading from Picard, and I think that he's basically like, look, I know I'm making the right call here. And then he buckles to the pleading, I think just out of respect for the man who was his captain. And then it kind of reiterates the fact that he was right in the first place. And I think he's partly angry at himself. And we saw a bit of that dynamic in the Next Generation finale, where Picard is pleading for Will to go back to the anomaly. And this is all set in the future, so it's set around this time, really.
Right.
And Riker is just kind of like, no, that's not what we're doing. I'm the captain of this ship now, kind of thing. And so it feels again a little bit like that, but I just think that because of his respect and kind of like, okay, I'll listen to you. I'll let you make that call, and then it turns out to be the wrong one. He's just kind of like, well, now we really are screwed. And so I think there's just a little bit of him being angry at himself. And as you said, he's going through a lot himself too. Mm-hmm. And I think that's making him a little bit more emotionally volatile.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
To some degree.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And there's an exchange just shortly after that in, I guess, what would be, it's not the ready room. What's the room that's not the captain's ready room, but it's the one with the big table in it? What's that called?
Oh, the observation lounge.
Observation lounge. So that there, like, they have an exchange afterwards where they, like, Riker has a lot to say. Picard tries to apologize, but then he stops him, and like, so they're not on bad terms at all, but they're still kind of like trying to figure their way out of this shit situation that they're in, right? And I really like the resolution. Like, I mean, you were talking about, I think you said something earlier in this podcast that it was a pun that you didn't realize you made, I don't think. But they literally have to ride the wave out of this anomaly to escape. Like, they surf. They have to surf. I was waiting for someone to make a reference to, like, you want us to surf out of here in a starship? Like, I was waiting for that reference to be made. But it was very cool. I really enjoyed the way that they did it. And a really interesting kind of, like, the anomaly was giving out these energy bursts, and Beverly Crusher made the analogy of the fact that it was actually contractions. Like, this anomaly had some living thing going on, and it was giving birth. And so they rode the birth of its offspring, whatever they happened to be. They looked like space Pokemon. But they were little squid-like things that ended up being made. And I mean, who knows? Like they were as big as starships, for all I can tell. Like I don't really understand the scale of them with the way that they did the effects.
Yeah, they kind of hark back to the pilot episode Encounter at Farpoint, and they actually mentioned.
Would they reference that? Yeah, aliens. I caught that.
Yeah,
I was that guy pointing and whistling, going like, "I know that reference. I got that. Yeah, I got that one."
So I really like that. The other thing that I want to mention as well is I am so glad that Gates McFadden is actually getting a decent role for Crusher after so long, because she was really good in the show. And then by the time the movies came out, it was like she was forgotten about. Like she was there, they included her, but she didn't get to do much at all. And now here we have her being really assertive. Like she's picking up a weapon and just shooting people point blank. And even when Picard and Riker see the remains, they're like, "This isn't the Crusher we know. Like this is pretty volatile and stuff." And then, but now like she was the one who was figuring out those contractions. She was the one that was figuring out like there's a whole countdown to this. And obviously as a team, because Jack Crusher comes up with the idea of harnessing energy because he recognizes about the lights, and it's basically everybody coming together to come up to that solution. But I'm just so glad that Crusher is kind of at the forefront of that, and it's just nice that she's just not this background, being relegated to the background like she was in the films.
Oh gosh, she gets to be everything. She gets to be science officer, medical officer with more experience than you and your doodads. Move out of the way. Let me save the captain's life. She gets to be, she gets to be a mother. She gets to be, which she has done before, but she gets to be an ex-lover in a very complicated relationship. And let me tell you, the exchanges between Riker and Picard are awesome. The exchanges between Picard and Beverly Crusher are breathtaking. I mean, these two actors are just destroying it. It's so phenomenal. There's a moment where we're all trying to figure out if it really is Picard's son in either the first or second episode. I can't remember which. And Riker goes down and wakes Crusher out of a coma. And she lets Picard know on the bridge that Jack Crusher is his son without saying a word.
Yeah.
And it was a phenomenal scene from both of them, from Stewart and McFadden. Like it was amazing. And then even more so, you finally get the confrontation between Picard and Beverly Crusher in the sickbay. I don't know where everybody else went. It went from a room full of really hurt people to just them. But it was that exchange where he has to ask her, "Why the hell didn't you tell me that I have a 24-year-old son? How come I haven't heard from you in 20 years?" Like there was a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And they did it just impeccably, both in the writing and in the acting. I loved that scene.
Yes, absolutely. I also love the build up to that with Riker just going like, doesn't he remind you of somebody? Like, you know this is yours, right? Like, he's blatantly yours. He has a British accent. And I even love that this is kind of like, how does he get the accent? Because there's the question about how Picard has a British accent as a Frenchman, which they address in the show in the previous season. And then this time, it's just kind of like, well, he went to school in London. It's like, okay, there we go. But yeah, I just love that whole kind of like, look, he's yours, Jean-Luc. Like, it's obvious.
Oh my God, the hints that Riker is giving is just like, just these dry moments of Riker looking down at Picard like, you really don't see it, huh? And Picard's like, see what? And Riker just kind of sighs and looks off in the distance as the turbo lift is going to go in wherever it's supposed to go. It's just like, oh my God.
And then you have really touching moments, like when he's trying to explain the importance of the relationship with his son. And he talks about how he took a turbo lift ride, which took 17 seconds. And it was in that 17 seconds when he thought that he could lose his child that he became a father. And then when we find out that Jack Crusher has been injured, Picard is in a turbo lift, which is taking about 17 seconds.
It is. It was 17 seconds. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can, and even the title of the episode is 17 seconds, you know, so it's like, so that's what it is. And you can just see from the look on his face, a little bit like Crusher not having to say anything to reveal that Jack was Picard's son. In the same way, like, he didn't have to say anything for you to realize that he was having that realization that he is a father.
Yep.
In the exact
100%.
same way. Yeah. And I love that Picard is now relating to Riker and Riker's experience as a father. He's kind of getting a crash course in, really. Yeah. Because he's had a lot thrown at him in a very short amount of time in a very high stress situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and again, like, to tip the hat to Stewart, the acting in that turbo lift, like, it's one shot on his face, close up. Yeah. And he goes through about 4 different stages. And it is subtle, like really, really subtle, but so well done. And like 17 seconds. That's how long the shot is. That's how long he has to do the work, right? To get that across to the audience. Like, you have the conversation that Riker and Picard have in that little flashback, that 5 years earlier situation, and that I think helps you get to where you need to be while Picard is on his 17-second turbo lift ride. But yeah, I think they did a very, very good job with that. And there's a lot of other really, more fun exchanges as well too. Like, there's a part in season 1 before the whole thing even gets going. He's talking about like this mysterious, thing he had, the communication he has, and that he has to go in space, and like it could be dangerous, and I wouldn't want to put you in danger. And Riker's like, since when? Like, just little things like that are just like really great, conversations. Like being able to have, Seven take them out of space dock, and she says engage, and the smirk on Picard's face is just like, yeah, I like the way that she does things. Little moments like that are just really, really good. And every time that, I, not this season, but because it's only happened once, but in the series, whenever you get to hear Picard say engage, that's just, people that are Star Trek fans, just kind of like the tingles that goes up your spine. It's like, yes, he said the thing. Yeah. It's like hello there from Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Like, it's just, people are just waiting for it.
Yeah. Like, it was so fun seeing Riker as the captain and Picard saying, you might as well call me number 1.
Yes, that's like, another one that I wrote down.
It was fun seeing that dynamic. And then he says to Picard, you have the con, and basically he has him be the captain. And they go back to their old dynamic, and that was somehow more exciting. Mm-hmm. It was interesting before, but it was so cool to kind of see that moment, and then for him to give the engage command. It's just like it just brings back so much. Even though I watch Next Generation all the time, I mean, it's not like I haven't seen this in 20 years.
Well,
and stuff.
It's been quite a while for me. I'm sure I've probably rewatched. I certainly haven't rewatched them in order. I have certainly seen them in syndication, but it's been 20 years because I think the last time I was watching Star Trek on TV was probably university. So it's been like I graduated in 21. So like it's been in 01. So 21 would have been 20 years. So yeah, it's been about that. I've seen other Star Trek shows since then, and of course the movies I think came out later. I can't remember. When was the last film for Next Generation out?
Oh, that would have been
early 2000s.
It was about 2001.
Yeah. So I was just finishing up.
Star Trek Nemesis. I'm pretty sure. I'd have to look this up, but I'm pretty sure Nemesis was 2002. I was off by a year.
Oh, that's close. So the other thing that I think is really interesting is the freedom that they get in the show to have, I guess, more real conversations from different characters. I'm on the fence about Captain Liam Shaw. I like him and I don't like him at the same time. It's an excellent performance.
Yes.
By Todd Stashwick, but he comes across as like he's a little bit, I don't want to say bigot isn't the right word, but like he doesn't like the Borg. We find out later why. But he's got a thing against Seven. I'm not sure why she's his first officer.
She was a Borg drone as well.
Yeah, so. Like it's very strange. So he's got these weird prejudices, and he's very well. He's a dick. Like, he's a dick. You don't like him. You're not supposed to like him, and so that's why I think he's such a good performance, because like you definitely don't like him.
Yeah, and there's also been a lot of things where we see a lot of other captains within Star Trek, and none of them have the grace or grandeur that someone like Picard has.
No.
And we often see some of them being dicks and things. And this is somebody who goes completely by the book for a lot of stuff. And I think that one of the things that they're trying to do is, one, give us a captain on screen that's very different to anything that we've seen before, which is good. But at the same time, also somebody who is more by the book to kind of highlight how different a captain like Picard really was. And why Picard was the captain of the Federation flagship. So it kind of makes sense in that regard that you're not going to have every captain being like Picard or Riker or Janeway, that a lot of the others could very well be like this guy. And although I don't work in the military, I'm sure that there's probably people in the military who've had commanding officers that have a similar kind of mentality and how they follow orders and command style and things.
He's also unstable. So, and they hint to it.
Oh, he is.
Vedic says something about his personal profile at Starfleet headquarters or something like that. But he suffers from PTSD. I mean, he gets into it in the 10 Forward scene, which I found the hologram thing the holodeck thing a little bit forced. The fact that it was on a separate power cell conveniently
has a different backup battery.
Yeah, that was. I'm sure it's true, and they made a good reason for it. But it very much felt like we need somewhere for these people to sit down and chat and have a father-son moment. And so we're gonna write in this extra power cell into the script because it will help us out.
So let me provide a bit of headcanon for this. So yes, they have that explanation. I think it also makes a lot of sense in that there have been so many times when the holodeck, both on the Galaxy class Enterprise and on the USS Voyager, the ship comes under attack. Somebody is just enjoying a nice leisurely break on the holodeck, and because of the way it's tied into the main power systems, that holodeck ends up with safeties going offline. The people are trapped in there, and it becomes this whole thing.
Right.
And so separating it from the ship probably means that they're not going to have to deal with that all the time. Right. Because it also almost became a trope that just started to get done to death. Like, oh, here's another episode of somebody being trapped on a holodeck. And so it kind of makes sense. Like, if we keep getting people trapped on a holodeck to a point where it's really a big problem that affects the entire ship, let's just cut it off and have it separate. And that, to me, would make sense, that's how the design would go. And it would also serve as, in the way that they said that it's basically like a final place to go as the ship goes down.
Oh, yeah, it's a mental lifeboat. Like, you can make it look like home. And because if you're all going to eventually suffocate and there's no hope, then, like, at least go be comfortable mentally and be with your friends. Which was the point of that scene. Like, I get that. But I mean, like, Liam Shaw's got PTSD. Like, he is messed up. And I don't think we've seen the end of him. Like, I think there's going to be more happening with him in this series, because I think they've put a little bit too much into the backstory. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I don't want him as a captain because I feel like there's just too much tension there, and he's already been proven wrong on a number of occasions. He's like, all right, fine. This is the mess you got ourselves into, you cowboy slinging sons of bitches. Now you can get us out of it. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
By being both Starfleet officers and scientists and cowboys, and I think that says a lot about, the Next Generation crew and the kind of the fly by the seat of your pants, if you'll pardon the pun. But yeah, I think they nailed that. What I really like Shaw as is a surly grease monkey, right? Like, I could see Shaw being that grumpy engineer that is, like, always feels underappreciated despite the fact that they really are appreciated. Like, I feel like that would be a good role because he'd still be likable because he would be doing good things. And I don't like him in command. I think that's the problem I have, is that he doesn't listen. He's not a character that listens. And I feel like his strength currently in the last episode that I saw is that he does things very well. And I will say the conversation that Seven and him have, where she's like, I don't like you. I don't want to talk to you about this, but you know the crew the best, and you are probably the best person for me to talk to solve this problem about the changeling on board, which I thought was a cool twist too. And
yes,
he gets that. And he understands, like, in that one exchange, he gets that she doesn't want to be talking to him. She could have tried to do this on her own, but she's swallowing her pride because she wants to get the job done. And she's talking to him. So then he breaks and says, okay, fine, I'll help you. You're right. You know, like, and I do like that about Star Trek in general, is that people can smash heads and still come to, I don't want to say, they don't necessarily even agree. They just find a middle ground where they can say, like, look, I don't like you. I want to throw you out an airlock, but I still need to save the lives of everybody on board. You know, and so if you're my best chance, well, then I'm going to have to stomach the next 15 minutes. Something that I'm noticing about this season more so than the other seasons, and you might be able to correct me, I am noticing where they would put commercial breaks. Are you seeing that too?
Yeah, there's like a little bit of a fade in the audio, and then it just kind of cuts. Yeah, I don't know if in the US where it's being aired on Paramount, if that's what they're doing. That would probably be my guess, but obviously we're in Canada, so I can't really verify that. But yeah, there's definitely a commercial break cut in there.
I wonder if Paramount has like a free version with commercials and then a paid version without. Some streaming services are doing that. If you're in the US and you subscribe to Paramount, folks, let us know. thecitadlecafe@gmail.com.
Well, here's a thought as well, because we're watching on Crave, which is the digital streaming service from Bell, but they also have the Sci-Fi channel. And is that ad supported? Because maybe they've just managed to they're just putting out the same one that they're broadcasting on TV.
That could be
I wonder if that's it.
Yeah, that could be it. That would make sense that they've got an edited version for commercials, whereas we might, if you were watching it on Paramount, I wonder if there are no obvious commercial spots, right?
Yeah, they did this with Doctor Who as well.
That's a good call.
In the UK, there's none of this happening, and then when it was released via BBC America to the US and Canada, they had these really weird bits where the audio, like music, will go from one scene to another, but they have it dip down and then come back up. And it's really jarring when it happens, because you know that's where the commercial is that they're inserting, despite not having it because it's being streamed and stuff. You were also kind of alluding earlier to, there was some things that you were seeing in the show that you just weren't sure of because you haven't had as much exposure, or certainly haven't seen some of Star Trek for such a long time. Was there anything else that was kind of standing out to you for that?
There's the Secret Service stuff with, what's the name of the Star Trek Secret Service that's spy?
Section 31.
Section 31. So we find out that Raffi from the first two seasons of Picard is off doing her own thing back with Starfleet now, but she's like doing undercover stuff. And I don't remember what she says she's part of because it's a different organization. I didn't recognize the name of it. And she's got a digital handler who I figured out who it was just by the way that they were talking. and the fact that I knew that Worf was in the show. But then she ends up going undercover. Her cover gets blown because she doesn't obey orders. Surprise. And Worf ends up saving her. So then in episodes 3 and 4, I think there actually is like an exchange between Worf and Raffi on several occasions. And that is the only part of the show that, well, one, we haven't had enough time for it to develop into something to enjoy. But I found that there was such a good tension and interest happening on the Titan A storyline. Bopping back to Raffi and Worf really felt like going, like, really it jarred the pacing for me. And I would have preferred like episode 1 puts everybody in space. Episode 2, all the Worf and Raffi stuff. And then 3 and 4 could have just stayed on the Titan for me. I would have been fine.
I do like that we've kind of been told from the trailer that there's a scene that's in the series trailer where he talks about how he's a pacifist now.
Yes.
And it's kind of like there was a lot of sort of commotion. Some people going like, oh, you shouldn't be a pacifist because it's Worf and things like that. And Terry, who is Terry Matalis, who wrote the show, he was kind of like, did nobody catch the fact that he has a giant sword? And in this episode where he appears, his first thing that he does is he massacres an entire room full of people and decapitates a Ferengi.
Which I'm okay with because I don't like Ferengis anyway.
I know, but like he is not a pacifist. He is still very much the kind of warrior that we've known and stuff. So I'm really interested to see how he's going. I know that they've written it that he's changed. There was a really good interview with Michael Dorn where he was talking about how there was stuff that he came in saying, this is what I feel Worf would have done, this is what I want to have happen. They've kind of said, well, this is what we're thinking, and then again they kind of reached a middle ground and with something that as a whole he's even more happier with, which is good.
And like I like the presence that he has as Worf. I feel like some of the lines he gets are a little campy. Like they force a lot of jokes with Worf, whereas
they kind of
the funny moments with Riker and Picard are character driven. The funny moments with Worf seem to be situation / dialogue driven.
That's more of a Deep Space Nine thing.
Okay, so and I have not seen nearly as much Deep Space Nine.
Yeah,
like I know I haven't finished the series. I watched a lot of it, but that was even longer ago. That was like high school.
Yeah, because with Worf, he was really a background character. It was almost kind of like, look, we've got a Klingon on the ship, and that's it. When Tasha Yar left, then he got more of a prominent role, and even so, he didn't get much character growth and depth because he was still one of the secondary ones on the bridge, whereas he had a lot more character depth, partly because they had a lot more time and they introduced more Klingon, so you got to see more of a richer Klingon culture and history being presented in Deep Space Nine. So that's where the bulk of his character has developed, and it's really cool just seeing how much he grows within Deep Space Nine.
Right.
So if you like him in Next Gen, he's great in that show. So again, it's exciting to see it now.
And that would be a gap that I probably have missing, right? Is that it feels jarring, this version of Worf compared to what I'm used to, which is TNG, right?
Right.
So
that would make sense.
Yeah, it would make sense. But yeah, I get some of it is just a little bit forced in terms of the lines. And it's less about that because those are minor things. It's more about the fact that a lot of what they're saying is repeating the same information back to one another and to you. Each time we go back, we learn that like there was a terrorist attack. They're trying to figure out who done it. This person that they're questioning is probably going to tell them. And now we have to go figure out what the bigger thing is. That happens like 3 times. And I'm just like, okay, Arrowverse, like I've been here before and I expect more from you, Picard season 3. So that I found was a little bit tedious. But the thing that I'm waiting for, which I'm not getting with the Worf stuff, is Worf with the other TNG crew, right? I'm assuming that's coming. At some point, we're going to see them in the same room. And that is when I think I'm going to be like, oh yeah, there's Worf. Like it's going to be the looks between, Michael Dorn and Patrick Stewart or Jonathan Frakes or like whoever it is. Like those are the moments that I think I'm going to be really on board for. The other thing that I think is really cool about the fact that this is a streaming show is that there's a lot more natural language, which I find really fun. And there lots of big laughs in the films for TNG. Usually it was Data swearing would be like the big, or Data would say something really kind of off color or embarrassing or emotional, and that would make people laugh in the theater.
Yeah, the ship's about to crash land, so he says, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
with his newly activated emotion chip.
But I gotta tell you, I gotta chuckle out of watching Jean-Luc Picard drop an F-bomb, talking to his son about him and his namesake, Beverly Crusher's first husband, Jack, Picard's best friend in the academy, and they were flying a shuttle blind. Everything has been shut off. They were doing some real bro stuff that they shouldn't have been doing, right? Which is again not something you imagine Picard saying. So like here's Picard talking about like stealing a car to go get laid. The car breaks down and we have to get back home without getting caught. Flying blind.
He had an invitation.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it was very funny. And Jack Crusher is calling him out on it the whole time. But then just when you don't expect him to do it, he says like it took 10 fucking hours to get back to home. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. And it's the kind of thing where like there's a bucket list, I'm sure, behind the scenes where like these actors are looking at the script going like, this is the last time I'm going to be playing Jean-Luc Picard on paper. I want to swear. Like, give me a moment. What is the best opportunity?
Yeah, they did allow him to swear in Next Generation, but he swore in French.
Right.
There is one point where he's on the bridge and he goes, mad.
Yeah.
So, like, they kind of alluded to the fact that, like, people still swear.
Yeah.
And I think also it's a really good way of humanizing him with his son, and it's kind of like making him more relatable and more open by, just kind of like, I'm not the Starfleet captain right now, I'm your father.
Right.
And, it feels like that, which I think works brilliantly.
And it's even as someone, that has parents in their 70s, like it's been so long that you forget that like your dad was a 20-year-old at some point, and
Yeah.
you can see Jack Crusher realizing that, right, this decorated admiral, this superstar who happens to be my biological father, who I know next to nothing about, that isn't written down in books or things that my mother has told me, was also a hotshot cadet at some point. Like he was also me right now, swashbuckling around the galaxy doing things, because I mean, Jack Crusher's in a lot of trouble, but it seems like he's in a lot of trouble because he was out doing good. Like he was out helping medical supplies get where they're going. And he might've had to bribe a couple people along the way, but he was still getting it done. So all that kind of stuff is really cool.
And we've even seen that hotshot side of Picard.
Oh yeah.
When we get that flashback where he's stabbed by a Nausicaan in the heart, and which is why he ended up with an artificial heart. It's again, everything feels like there's so much attention to detail for the history of the show.
Yeah.
And I love all the little, here's all the things that have kind of happened in the meantime that we've missed. It's not like all the big adventures stopped. We find out that there's a Herodian, which is one of the aliens from the Delta Quadrant from Starship Voyager, somehow made it to the Alpha Quadrant, and Picard had to face off against one of the Herodian. And it's just one of these little subtle references, but it's like, yeah, there's been some big adventures that happened. And then also there's the whole thing with him and Beverly. Like, I just like that these little tidbits of, there's still a lot that's gone on. I like it.
I know we've got to wrap things up here, but one thing I will leave with is that I am hoping for, and you might be able to answer this question, if there is a spin-off with Jeri Ryan as 7 of 9 with her own command, I'm on board.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I really like the character, and I like what she has done with the character in Picard specifically. I wasn't a big fan on Voyager. The character was what it was. It was written at a time that it was written in, but I really like what they've done with 7 in Picard. And it really feels like Jeri Ryan has just grabbed it by the horns and been just like, I'm going to make this fantastic. And I really enjoy her screen presence. I like that. She's got that, I don't know, she really does that balance between the super strict rule follower and the I know everything because I know all these rules and Starfleet regulations backwards and forwards, but I also know when to break them. And I like that. And I think those are qualities in a Starfleet captain that make for a very interesting show.
Yes. Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. It'll certainly be interesting if they do bring back the crew, because there's been hints and more kind of, I think, Sir Patrick Stewart trying to put Paramount in an awkward position of, we want to be doing more things, like another show together as the Next Gen crew or another movie. Like, make it happen. And he's doing this in front of an entire room of people at Comic-Con.
Right.
So, he's trying to get the fans involved as well. So I don't think it's as much of Paramount going like, yeah, we're thinking about it. I think it's more kind of like, look, I'm making this very public. We should do this. And so whether we get another movie, this may not be the last time that we see this crew together. That I'm happy about. But as you said, there is that sort of trepidation of, we may not have much longer with this crew as well, as the more that time that goes on.
Yeah.
So the sooner the better.
And there's something about, I mean, this is not really how it would go, but there's something very funny to me about like the TNG crew cruising around in space in their retirement golf carts, getting into all kinds of trouble like they're 20-year-olds, and then the responsible 7 of 9 captain having to come in and save everybody's butt and basically scold them for like, could you just not maybe do this on the edge of the Romulan space, or like wherever you're doing it? This is really not the time or place to be doing this. It's like, man, space is meant to be explored. It's like, Riker, go to your room. Like, I can see I can see that happening quite a bit. And
Yeah.
there was even a moment at the beginning of this series, or season rather, where I think Seven of Nine was speaking with Picard, and Riker just like puffs up and slams her down. Like, who do you think you're talking to? And Picard has to like, what? No, she's a friend. Well, she's allowed to talk to me like that. Like, we've been through more than you realize. There was time travel. There's a whole thing. Like, just I don't have time to explain it right now, but like, we're good. And I like that rapport that they've managed to cross over, those characters in a way that they have a really, really nice rapport.
Yeah. One final thing that I will say and end on is that it's interesting that we've ended up with Vadic as this kind of this bounty hunter that's after Jack Crusher for whatever reason we don't know, and then we find out that she's kind of like Vader in that there is a Palpatine.
Oh, yes.
That's in charge. So there's somebody bigger and things. And I'm still racking my head as to who it could be, as to why they're going. Is this a character that we've had before in the franchise? Is this somebody completely different? Because Vadic is new, but the person who's in charge, are they familiar to us? I have no idea. And that is a real interesting twist that we ended up with this latest episode.
Yeah, there's a lot more going on, I think, between Vadic and Jack Crusher. That's where things seem to be headed. And now that we've established the bond, between Jack Crusher and Picard, I feel like there's going to be either Crusher's going to be kidnapped, or he's going to leave to make sure that he doesn't put his mother in danger or something, and then everybody's going to have to go get him. Like, that's kind of I think where things are going to have to go. Well, that brings us into the Internet Minute, which is brought to you by you, dear listener. The Citadel Cafe is 100% listener supported. If you're getting value out of the show, please consider putting a little bit of value back in. You can become a member at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Joining at any level will get you an invite to the member-only Discord server, as well as access to Barista Cut bonus audio sessions when we have a chance to record them. Special thanks to our Bean Counter patrons, Cosmic and Smurf588. Thank you for your support of this episode. Patron count is at 27. That's down 1 from the last time we recorded. Our goal each time we record is to have at least one more patron than the previous episode. If you would like to be patron number 28, visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. My pick this week is short and sweet. Blind Wave is a channel on YouTube. It's a group of friends that run a reaction channel, which sounds terribly contrived, but these guys are genuine in all the things that they do. I've watched a large amount of their videos, and not only are they just really nerdy, really invested in the things that they're watching, but it's good editing. It's timely and current shows as well as older shows that they haven't seen, which is cool. And they usually have positive things to say. So even when they watch Justice League and they're like, that's not the best movie, I'm really glad that, Zack Snyder got a chance to put his vision on film, though. I can see the through point here. I can understand what Snyder was trying to do, even though I didn't like all of it. And so I feel like what I like about that is that if it's something nerdy that they don't like, they don't label it shit, right? They don't rant about it and go on forever and dismiss the entire thing. They really can see the value in it because there's 4 of them. And ultimately, someone dislikes it more than the others, but then someone can also make a good point, and you can see somebody else nod in the background. And it's like, yeah, okay, I kind of get it. And it's worth watching on video because of the visual reactions. These guys are invested. Watching their reactions to season 2 finale of Mandalorian, when Luke Skywalker shows up, a couple of guys were so excited they couldn't stay seated, they had to stand up. They were so into what was going on. So I highly recommend it. Blind Wave. If you really want a good window into just how genuine and fun these guys are, check out their mailbag episodes. Their fans and community will send in fan mail, gifts, nerdy Funko Pops and action figures and board games and D&D figures and stuff like that. And every 2 weeks they do an episode, which is between half an hour and an hour long, of them unboxing each thing. And they unbox it. They thank the person that sent it. They go in a little bit of a conversation about how cool it is, often into some rabbit hole about something. And you get to see a window into these 4 friends that have been friends for a very long time. And it's very, very fun. They're a good fun time. Adult language, a little loud sometimes. So like maybe not safe for work. They're not vulgar, but like they curse. They're adults. They use adult language. And definitely not something I would have with young kids. Teenagers, maybe. I'd say PG-13 would be stuff. If any dirty jokes are more like innuendos and little nods at the camera, they don't really get gross about anything, but they drop some swears and stuff from time to time. But very, very good channel and lots of content. Something for everyone at Blind Wave on YouTube. Alastair, what's your pick this week?
Mine is from Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, where he interviews his fellow friends in the TV and film industry. And recently he had one with the amazing Jonathan Frakes. And it is just fascinating hearing him not just talking about his work on Picard, but also just reminiscing about his time on the set of Next Generation. There's even things like him talking about him and the rest of the cast, their relationship with Will Wheaton, playing Wesley Crusher, and how they didn't even know about all the stuff that was going on in his private life with his parents and things, and but just the kind of family dynamic that they had themselves. And just it's just wonderful hearing a lot of these kind of stories coming from the man himself, especially as he's so well spoken as well. And it's one of those things that I kind of wished it just went on even longer than it did. But that is fantastic. So again, that's on YouTube, and it's there as a podcast, but it's so fun just watching the video and just seeing his eyes light up when he's talking about things. So Jonathan Frakes on Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum.
That wraps up this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can get more information about the show and links to some of the things that we talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. Music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod. You can email us at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com or find the show by name on Twitter. Subscribe for free on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, as well as YouTube. And don't forget to leave us a rating or a review on your favorite platform. Word of mouth is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Citadel Cafe and where they can go to listen to it. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything I am doing online at joelduggan.com. That includes links to things like my other podcast all about Minecraft, the Spawn Chunks, at thespawnchunks.com, as well as Twitch, where I do streams almost every day, Minecraft most of the week, and Lego on Fridays. And that's been a lot of fun. Alastair, where can people find you online?
You can find everything I'm up to at alastairmcfly.com. And that also includes a link to my newest blog at medium.com/@AlastairMcFly.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick 2.